Today, I'm going to talk about an amazing spiritual experience that I had yesterday. I wanted to try to do this outside, but it is so cold out. It is still between -14 and -19 degrees. And I can't even think. It's so cold outside. I am able to connect. It's harder to stay connected in that kind of weather. So I'm going to talk about this right now here. For the past couple of weeks, I have received downloads and intuitive hits about the fact that I was going to receive some communication from a stranger that would in turn give me information that I needed to hear and know. And this had come in through different avenues of intuitive hits and downloads for me at a time when a lot of my old programming that I'm in process of releasing was trying to pull me back into doubt and fear and anxiety. Doubt being the big word to take note of. And what had occurred prior to yesterday is part of the story. So I'm going to back up before yesterday. And this would be about a couple weeks ago. Maybe I've been receiving this information that I would meet a stranger, maybe let's say a month ago, even as far out as a month ago. Because 2 to 3 weeks ago, on a really cold night, again, it was probably a -degree night, I took one of my walks to the grocery store to go re-up on my osmosis water. And being from the state that I'm in, I know how to bundle up and stay warm. And so I was pretty covered up through the face. And I was not expecting to see another person out. It was dark and really cold and windy. So I was definitely not expecting to see another person out. I ran into a gentleman who was walking his dog. And I remember when I saw him, I thought, wow, that's really, I mean, obviously people have to get their dogs out and they'll still walk them around here, obviously in cold temperatures, because this is a state where you get used to that. But I don't know, it felt not, I don't know, felt, I don't want to say out of place or, weird. It just, something seemed different about it, versus just randomly running into a person, as you're taking a walk. So we ended up crossing paths, and because his dog continued to stop. So he was ahead of me and I'm walking now kind of towards them and the dog kept stopping. So I kept getting closer and closer to them and we were eventually gonna, intersect our paths. And we stopped, and as I do, since I'm an animal lover and I communicate with animals, and I always ask for permission, may I, pet your dog or pet your animal? And he said, of course. So I went down to go give love to the dog, and the dog and I were in, cool communication for a minute. And this is where, he finds out that, I'm a pet sitter and I communicate with animals, and I work on I help animals with animal healing, and he was intrigued by this. So then now he's walking in the same direction as I am with his dog, and so we continue walking together because we're heading the same direction. And he makes this really cool statement that night. And I'm going to try to paraphrase him as best as possible, but it was along the lines of, he also knew I was on a spiritual awakening journey and had said, yes, he is too. And we talked about the modalities that we've each, been into ourselves. And he tells me at that point, yes, I have certain modalities I work on as well. And one of the things that I take into consideration when I meet another human on my path is the fact that, and he referred to, I say universe, he referred to the universe as God. So I'll refer to the universe as God. That's how he was speaking, at least initially. And he said that God sends us people in our path that we are supposed, that we're supposed to meet, right? And we're supposed to learn from each other. They're supposed to teach us something about ourselves. And I loved that he made that comment. I was like, yeah, right on, cool. Really liking this conversation with this guy. And because it's not all the time that when you run into random people on the road, especially on a freezing night, in darkness, that you're going to meet somebody as awakened as you are. And he continues to say that I just can really tell that this particular interaction between you and I is something that I just really know I need to pay attention to. And I just was like, God, that's so cool. I love that. And, we ended up parting ways where he had said, okay, you're a pet sitter. Well, here, do you have a card? And I had said, well, here, yes, here's my business card. And then, gave that to him. And then we ended up parting at that point because he was going in a different direction with his dog and I needed to continue to the grocery store. And I wasn't sure if I'd hear from him. I run into people all the time and give them my card and you either hear from them or you don't. And so, but that encounter stuck with me. It was really a cool encounter. And I just remember thinking what a cool thing, a cool statement he made. Okay. So now we're going to fast forward to, we'll fast forward to a couple of weeks. So about a week ago. So a couple of weeks from that encounter, but about a week ago from today, he finally reaches out and says, it was really nice to meet you the other night. I'd be curious to know what type of spiritual, speak with you further about your spiritual path you were on. I wanted to plant the seed about us potentially connecting at the beginning of February or in the beginning of February. And then he just kind of left it at that. And, I wasn't sure what this was about, if he wanted to speak to me about potential pet sitting or just have a conversation. I don't know. But was intrigued. It was because it was a really, I don't know. It was the message was very positive. And and again, throughout this time period now, through this story I'm telling you, I'm receiving messages from my spirit team that I am going to meet a stranger who is going to give me information that will be very beneficial for me in moving me forward in my path and within my abundance and within my my healing, my spiritual awakening, and moving forward within my soul's purpose. And I kind of was thinking that, maybe this person is that, but I really hadn't quite connected the dots yet. I think a slight thought passed through me and I thought, maybe, and that's what I think intrigued me to reply back to him and say, right on, I got your message. Yeah, just, hit me up when, it works in your schedule, because he was trying to say, I'm really busy. However, when I have a moment, I'm planting the seed now to let you know that I will be reaching out again to you in the beginning of February. And so, like I said, this was probably right after the first of the year in 2026. So we had met at the end of the year in 2025. And yeah, so just to give a time reference. And like I mentioned, this whole way through, I'm receiving these downloads, hadn't connected the dots yet. So Now fast forward to a couple of days before yesterday, and I get a note from him because he knows I don't drive, and that because the other thing he had mentioned in that last text message was, it's I saw that, and I know you know how to dress in this type of weather, and you seem, obviously like you're very versed and capable of being able to handle weather like this in this state. However, I'm curious to know, what had you out walking by yourself on this night? Well, he hadn't known I don't have a vehicle. So I had replied back to him and told him I don't have a vehicle at this moment. And so I walk everywhere. And this was just one of my journeys to the grocery store to refill water and get, re-up on my water supply. And, then mentioned, I grew up in the state, so I obviously know how to dress so that I am prepared for, any type of weather. And so he knew that I didn't. So a couple days ago, I get another message from him, and he had said, I know that I told you I was going to reach out to you at the beginning of February. However, because we are in a current super freeze right now in this current state and have been for about a week, I think now, and we've got like another week of this at least. That's not uncommon for this particular state. But I guess in the past 7 years, it has been. So it is very interesting that my first full year back here, I bring the freezing temperatures because apparently it's been pretty mild in the past 7 years is what I've been told. And that happens to me all the time when I jump from state to state. The anomalies occur. I definitely always bring change when I move into specific states. And so he had mentioned that I know that you had said you don't have a vehicle. And since we're hitting this super freeze moment, I wanted to offer if you'd like, I can, give you a ride to the grocery store so that you don't have to walk in this cold weather. And I thought that is so sweet of this, this random person that I just met to just offer, a ride to me or, to offer out a ride. And I thought that was so just the kindness and the generosity of that. Like if I start crying, it's only because I love when people are kind like that, because we just, if you are a sensitive on this journey, that's not the commonality, and that is more of an anomaly for us. So if I get like emotional, this is happy tears to know that there are kind people like this, and I was in a place where this was right after the holidays and after, having this experience with having to really eradicate my family out of my life and emancipate myself from them completely in the way where it was like, okay, this is for sure at this point, there's not going to be any potential for reunions here at this point moving forward like I had anticipated previously when I had initially had to get them out of my life in order to start the healing work for myself. So when he offered this, I told him, I had said, well, I have a way of, having my groceries delivered for me at the moment that I work with. However, I do, if you are okay with it, if you want to help me out with a ride to go get some water, sure, I'll take you up on that. And I was intrigued to, kind of get to know this person a little bit more and this kindness because there was something else there. And that was the other part of the message from my intuition and my intuitive guides and my sacred divine guardians is that they were telling me that well, see, and I know I just mentioned he, but I didn't know it was going to be he necessarily. So they had mentioned something like this person may come in with different intentions, but inevitably and ultimately they are going to end up, you're going to gain from it and they're going to gain from it in a way that was not upon their initial intention. And so I said, yeah, and we set it up for this to happen yesterday. And in the afternoon. And since I did not have to have anything else going on that day, at least that I had any commitments to, we took a trip that probably could have been easily, 15, 20 minutes tops, round trip, half an hour at most. And we ended up having a conversation that lasted about 3, 4 hours. And we sat there in the parking lot of the grocery store after I got my water, and he started asking me, more about, my journey and my healing and everything that I've been doing for myself within my healing and awakening. And then he kind of sat there and listened, And right before this day had happened, I had actually been dealing with a lot of, like I mentioned, the attachment and implant videos that I put out had intention for any of you that resonate with those, because this is work I have been using on myself that has been helping to alleviate a lot of the low vibrational energies that have been programmed and implanted within my energy space, for as long as I am aware, probably most likely. And on a lot of them, not all of them necessarily, but it was part of the reason that was keeping me sick on a physical level, which is something that occurs and people need to be aware of. And that's why I wanted to share that knowledge with the rest of you who resonate with that and want that sovereignty for themselves, so that you can self-govern for yourself and be in freedom for yourself, and know that authority is a frequency and you can choose to cancel that contract. And that has been the work I have been working on recently for myself. So up until that night, so the night before he was going to help me out, I had been feeling a lot of anxiety that just was coming out of the blue, was coming out of nowhere. And when that happens, when you can go, is this mine or is this somebody else's? Or something else's, not necessarily a human being, somebody else's, but just some, other energies besides your own. When I had made that thought, about it, sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought. I have to figure out where I was. Bear with me. Okay, so the night before I had been feeling all this anxiety, right? And I had been pretty diligently reorganizing my field with trying to put positive, peaceful, loving, thoughts of gratitude and forgiveness energy into that space after, from releasing all that no longer serves me from old programming. But was having a really hard time with it at certain points. And that last night before we had seen each other I was really having a hard time with it, and I knew it wasn't mine. And that's what makes it even harder when we know it's not ours, because you're like, well, how do I get rid of this? And again, repetition with positive, loving intentions is part of, and obviously there's other, sound frequency, and the right sound and frequency to help rebalance your field. All these modalities and tools are essential to helping yourself rebalance and rid yourself of attachments and implants and negative and low frequency and vibrations that either are yours that you need to release from programming, or this could be, something that has been placed within your energy space that isn't yours that you need to release as well. Like, for instance, authority frequency, and that was something that I definitely had many years of trying to get released, or that I had to release from many years of having within my energy field. And that night before I get home from work, and I had experienced this peace that I had never experienced in my life, that would be something that if you came from an emotionally immature, very parasitic, toxic, narcissistic type of environment where it's pure chaos all the time and peace doesn't exist, what becomes your baseline energy is chaos. And peace, you're like, I don't know what this is. Like, what do you mean peace? Like, you hear the words and that's what you're supposed to, try to, become the frequency of, but you're like, I've never experienced that. What is that? And so that night I started to feel this sense of just like lightness. And I mean, that's the best way for me to physically describe it to another human is I started feeling light. My thoughts became light. They weren't heavy. The weight lifted out of my solar plexus and my gut space. Like I actually was able to eat things that I hadn't been able to eat in a minute. That kind of lightness as well. Like my gut actually stopped hurting for the first time in a long time without having to really put a lot of focus into making that occur. And everything just got lighter around me too, and it felt beautiful. It was, my opinion is what, it reminds me of what it feels like when you're in love, when you're in that loving frequency and bliss and joy. Peace is what so as a person and the other part of what a person from that complex PTSD, very parasitic environment, what you're coming from is survival mode. You're coming from trying to release yourself from that victimhood mentality and survival mode space. People that when you grow up with parents and people that are taking care of you and a family that is completely immersed in victimhood mentality, of course, you've never experienced peace. You only know chaos. So when you experience it for the first time, you're like, this feels amazing. What is this? What is this? And so I did start to experience it that night. And I remember I had the best sleep in months that night. Slept for longer periods at a time without having to wake up and go to the bathroom and things like that and just wake up to flip my body because of certain pain that was in the body. And it was great. And then I woke up and it was just beautiful. I was still feeling this peace. And I didn't know that's what it was called yet at that point. I just was like, this feels so good. And I did all my, normal spiritual practice, mantras, prayers, sound therapy, and everything that I typically would do. And, was making sure my body was getting the right nutrients and liquids and, herbs that I typically have been using for myself to heal and rebalance and recalibrate my body, and prepared myself to go meet up with this gentleman that was going to help me get water. And so we went to, he comes to pick me up, and, it felt fine. And he was, it was really nice. It was pleasant to see him again. He's probably, we didn't discuss age. He knows my age, but, I would assume he's maybe like 20 years older than me. I don't know. But I go into the grocery store, I get my water. It just felt great. Like normally, when you're in this like kind of coming out of hermit mode space and you're trying to get comfortable being in society again, it's just kind of like, get out. But I was feeling like I didn't even care. I was like floating basically in the grocery store. And then I come out and I get into his vehicle, and we start talking. And he was supposed to go back to work. He was on his lunch break. Yeah, he actually has his own like construction or whatnot business. So he was in his own time and space, and so he can do what he wants. But I didn't have anything else that I had scheduled to do. So in theory, if I was in flow state at that moment, where I'm like, I'm going where the highest version of myself is getting the most excitement. And I guess it's here right now, and we're going to have this discussion. And so we go into, he starts asking me questions about my healing and spiritual awakening path and journey. And like I said, we talked for 3 to 4 hours. And it was the most enlightening, uplifting experience I had ever had. And in the moment we're talking, I cried multiple times through this conversation, happy tears, because I kept having these epiphanies and this realization, like, oh my God, you're the stranger. You're the stranger that I was supposed to meet, because what he was giving to me that day is he was helping me see that what I was experiencing and had been for about 24 hours now was peace. And then I was having the rationalization, like the reason that I couldn't understand peace and connect with it previous to this, I had been in the initial stages of my healing journey when I talk about those first 2 years that went uninterrupted. And I was just in this blissful space that I was just being guided. And I was like, this is cool. I don't know how this is happening, but I like it. And I was crying every day, but I still was loving it because, I was feeling the release of getting all that excess, heavy, dense energy out of me. And then, but still flowing because I was being guided by sacred divine energy, my higher self that was guiding me. And I was in peace then, but I didn't know what that was. And this is when I talk about this, I've talked about this before in videos, that I had no idea that it was called peace. I just knew that I felt maybe I even used words like it felt peaceful, but I didn't understand that that was the vibration of peace. And this is me explaining and expressing that this is how my whole journey has been, that I'll experience things, but sometimes I don't understand what it is that I'm experiencing until later down the road. And then I'll have this epiphany. I'm like, oh my God, that's what that was. And then I said to him, and I start crying, and I said, oh my God, I'm going to start crying right now because I'm thinking about it. But I was like, I'm experiencing peace. And I thought about it and I was like, you know what? I think this is probably the first time in my life, because I had lived and grown up in survival mode where peace didn't exist. And it was beautiful. And I was looking at him and he was like, he was being very encouraging and very supportive of, hearing my, epiphanies and just my story and everything. And I had just said, I was just like so grateful, so much appreciation for this person. And I was like, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being this for me right now, because this is what I was told was going to happen, and you're giving me hope again and faith in the process that I'm not supposed to, that I am on the right path, and that everything I am doing is what I should be doing, because I started to doubt it for a minute, because I started having the negative, dense feelings coming in, trying to control my mind to make me feel that way. And I knew better. I knew better, but this last year had been a doozy for me, because coming back into my home state with all these dense energies of all my family members and all the unhealed souls and wounds and unhealed humans that are here, I feel it as a sensitive. It's so heavy. Because I was such an open wound coming back because of what had occurred and the experience that I had experienced of this just intense situation that I had to realize with who my family truly was and how low vibrational and unhealed that they really were. And then I was, somebody that was trying to break out of that. And that's why my journey has been so much harder than a lot of people's. And this is the point of me saying this, is one of the things we had talked about is I said that was one of my first realizations in my healing is I said, I know there's others that I can feel it, that have had this type of upbringing where it's like some of them may never have experienced love, definitely may have never experienced peace. And when you haven't had that experience, you don't know what that feels like. And I'm telling you that it exists. That peace and love exists. Luckily, when I was younger, I was able to experience love through relationships that I had. and friendships that I had had, and got to see beautiful parenting from my friends and, the guys that I dated. And that there is a family love that does exist out there. So that's what gave me hope back then. But I had never experienced true peace in the awareness that I can today and speak on it right now. I did experience it in the first 2 years of my healing journey 7 years ago, but I was unaware what I was experiencing. I just knew it felt good. And so this is a message to give to those of you who are coming out of survival mode and have never experienced anything else but chaos. And also that when you're receiving these messages, to know, like, I told this gentleman, I was like, you are the messenger. You're the person that was supposed to give me the hope again, to remind me that I am on the right path. I am doing the right thing. I need to keep going. I need to keep moving forward in this. And that I have a purpose. And that purpose is what I have been feeling the whole time through. And ever since I became awakened to this 28 years ago. So to keep going. And, he gave me so much encouragement and helped me see things, above and beyond where I, kind of was feeling like a little, stuck and stagnant, where I was like, am I doing good? He's like, no, you got this, you're doing this right and this right. And you're seeing this through a different lens. And so I feel like I'm here to help you see that it's much more, it's better than you see for yourself right now. So if you're seeing this message, I am here to be that reminder for you and that confirmation for you that you are doing so much better than you maybe think or envision or perceive yourself to be. That you are in such a much better space than you think you are. So keep doing what you're doing. Just stay on the path. You're doing it. I'm going to get emotional again because it was probably one of the most spiritual moments in my spiritual healing journey that was so beautiful. Like, where I was like, oh my God, I'm speaking to the divine right now. We're having a divine moment right now you could feel it. It was just, the air, you could feel this different frequency in the air that felt lighter and beautiful and loving. And, there was not this heaviness that people like ourselves are used to when we grow up in that type of environment. And this is, again, just a video to be encouraging for you. It was 33:13 on the clock. That's the threes have been, I've been seeing the threes a lot lately. But this is just that encouragement and that reminder for you and confirmation that you have to remember that if you came from an environment where it was very chaotic, narcissistic, emotionally immature, survival mode, victimhood mentality, that's what you were trained. And to deprogram that takes time. But as long as you're paying attention to the signs and synchronicities, that's your higher self reminding you that you're on the right path. Or, your higher self will, redirect you, and give you signs for that as well. And ever since that encounter now yesterday, I have been in the most beautiful, peaceful spaces. Everything has gotten lighter. And if you're seeing this and you're not feeling that quite yet for yourself, you will be. It's on its way to you. Because as always, in any message that you receive from your higher self, or if your higher self is speaking through me to you right now, this is that reminder that you just need to continue having faith and hope. And please do, because if you're watching this, you have a purpose and you know that you do. Maybe you don't know what it is yet, And that's okay, because he had reminded me of one thing that I wanted to also make sure that I stated in this video, was the fact that I know that I had to release my family. So I know that I had to release my family, and I've been a little confused about how to move forward with that. Meaning, like, I mean, definitely, having physical detachment so that they are no longer allowed within my physical space was essential, sure. And that'll probably always have to continue. But I could also feel that, the false narratives were still occurring, which means that I was feeling that type of negative energy that was still coming at me as well, which in turn helps me know that I still had energy cord attachments to them if I was feeling that. And that's a reminder that you need to cut those cords still from anyone that's giving low frequency, low energy to you and siphoning your energy and your light from you. And that was the reason why I was like, I have to emancipate myself, like, completely, and like cut them off. And, and again, when you have to realize this at a certain point in your life, after, you had no idea that this was the path that you had to be on with your own family members, like, it's a lot to take in. It's very overwhelming. And so I thought that was going to have to be, indefinitely and infinitely, always like that. And he went on to remind me, because I feel like I get a lot of information from people saying, like, well, you don't want to give love to humans that are trying to put negative energy at you. But then you hear information where it's like, but you do want to love even your enemies. And it's like, okay, that's confusing. How do you do that? So the part of the other message that he gave to me was the fact that he had said, you still want to cut the energy cord, let's say me to you. You want to cut that cord off. Obviously I had to cut that energy cord off so they don't have that direct access to me like that anymore. He said, but you do still want to send them love. And the way that you send them love is through the attachment, the cord attachment that you have with your higher self, through our white light energy, right? And then you send, sacred divine guardians, sacred divine universe, please send, love, light, and healing, to all my enemies known and unknown, or something like that. Or all those needing, assistance and support in their healing, which would include them. And you could get specific. You could, name each person, sure, but you can also keep it general. But he reminded me that when you give that command and that verbal to the field, to your energy field, now you got to remember you have a team, a spiritual team that's working with you, and they are the ones that will now take over, because you're giving them the command that send them healing, because they still need that. And they still need that from the divine, not from you. And that's where I was getting confused. I thought that initially that's what my job was a long time ago. And then I realized, well, no, it's not my job anymore, But then I was like, oh, but you have to cut it off completely. Well, yes, you cut it off in the physical plane completely, but you send it to the spiritual plane for them to take care of and handle on your behalf. And so I hope that this has been helpful for any of you that are, trying to detach from that type of survival, chaotic environment of growing up in the victimhood mentality and scarcity mindset, lack mentality, of emotionally immature families that were very abusive and neglectful and abandoned, with lack of love, and all that. Sending them love and healing through your divine source to have them take that into their hands and handle it how they see fit for them on your behalf. Thank you for watching this today.